Hi, Year 5. So I'm going to be doing your class reads. And to start off with, I'm going to catch you up to the book that we're reading in Year 6 because I've got the series on order. So I'm going to read you the whole series as the class reads as we're doing in Year 6. So our book has been The Wizards of Once by Cressida Cowell. So without further ado, let's get going. How's everyone doing, by the way? Hope you're okay. Here we go. Sorry, I've just taken a drink of tea and I'm going to start coughing any second. So, once there was magic. It was a long, long time ago in the British Isles, so old it did not know it was the British Isles yet, and the magic lived in the dark forests. Perhaps that you feel that you know what a dark forest looks like. Well, sorry, I just have to change my position. Well, I can tell you right now that you don't. These were forests darker than you would believe possible, darker than ink spots, darker than midnight, darker than space itself, and as twisted and as tangled as a witch's heart. They were what is now known as wild woods, and they stretched as far in every direction as you could possibly imagine, only stopping when they reached a sea. There were many types of humans living in the wild woods, the wizards, who were magic, and the warriors, who were not. The wizards had lived in the wild woods for as long as anyone could remember, and they were intending to live there forever, along with all of the other magic things, until the warriors came. The warriors invaded from across the seas, and though they had no magic, they brought a new weapon that they called iron. And iron was the only thing that magic could not work on. The warriors had iron swords and iron shields, and iron armour, and even the horrifying magic of the witches was powerless, against this metal. First, the warriors fought the witches and drove them into extinction in a long and terrible battle. Nobody cried for the witches, for witches were bad. For the witches were bad magic, the worst sort of magic, the kind of magic that tore wings from larks and killed for fun, and could end the world and everyone in it. But the warriors did not stop there. The warriors thought that just because some magic was bad, that meant all magic was bad. So now the warriors were trying to get rid of the wizards too, and the ogres and the werewolves, and the entirely quarrelling mess of good sprites and bad sprites that burned like little stars through the darkness, casting mischievous little spells on each other, and the giants who moved slow and careful through the undergrowth, larger than mammoths, but as peaceful as babies. The warriors had sworn that they would not rest until they had destroyed every last bit of magic in the whole of that dark forest, which they were chopping down as fast as they could with their iron axes to build their forts and their fields and their new modern world. And I have a poster to show you, and it says, "You have now entered the Iron Warrior Empire. All magic is banned in this territory. No sprites, no giants, no rogrebreaths, no snowcats, no werewolves, no green teeths, or any other magic creatures, no flying, no enchanted objects, no spelling, cursing, or charming, no magic whatsoever. And any wizards entering these lands may most unfortunately have their heads removed by order of Her Majesty Queen Sycorax, Iron Warrior Queen." There you go. That is a very scary poster. This is the story of a young boy wizard and a young girl warrior who have been taught since birth to hate each other like poison. The story begins with the discovery of a gigantic black feather. Could it be that the wizards and the warriors have been so busy fighting each other that they have not noticed the return of an ancient evil? Could that feather really be the feather of a witch? I didn't know witches had feathers. Did you? That's the feather. And then, I am a character in this story who sees everything, knows everything. I will not tell you who I am. See if you can guess. The story begins here. Don't get lost. These woods are dangerous. Ooh. Woods are dangerous places. Can trip and everything. Number 1, Chapter 1, To Catch a Witch. It was a warm night for November. Too warm a night for witches, or so the story said. Witches were supposed to be extinct, of course. Excuse me. But Tsar had heard about the way they stank, and he imagined he could smell that now in the quietness of the dark forest, a faint but definite stink of burning hair mixed with long dead mice, and a little kick of viper's venom, once smelt, never forgotten. Tsar was a wild young human boy who belonged to the wizard tribe. He was riding on the back of a giant snowcat in a part of the forest so dark and mangled and tangled that it was known as the Bad Woods. He should not have been there, for the Bad Woods were warrior territory, and if the warriors were to catch him, well, what everyone said was Tsar would be killed on sight. Off with his head, as was the pleasant warrior custom. But Tsar did not look even remotely worried. He was a cheerful scruff of a boy, with a tremendous quiff of hair shooting upwards from his forehead, as if he had accidentally come into contact with some invisible vertical hurricane. The snowcat he was riding was called King Cat, a noble creature which was a giant form of lynx, far too dignified for his cheeky master. King Cat had shining paws so round they looked unreal, fur so deep it was like powder snow, and such a rich silvery grey colour that it was almost blue. The snowcat ran swiftly but softly through the forest, his black-tipped ears swivelling from side to side as he ran, for he was scared, although too proud to show it. Only that very morning, Tsar's father, Encancer the Enchanter, king of wizards, had reminded everyone that it was forbidden for any wizard to dare set one toe in the Bad Woods. But Tsar was the most disobedient boy in the wizard kingdom in about 4 generations, and forbidding things only encouraged him. In the past week, Tsar had tied the beards of 2 eldest and most respectable wizards together when they were sleeping at a banquet. He had poured a love potion into the pigs' feeding trough, so the pigs developed mad, passionate crushes on Tsar's least favourite teacher, and followed him around whenever he went, making loud, enthusiastic squealing and kisses noises. He had accidentally burned down the western trees in the wizard camp. Most of these things hadn't gone entirely intentionally exactly the way he'd planned. Tsar had just got carried away in the heat of the moment. And yet, none of these disobedient things was half as bad as what Tsar was doing now. There was a large black raven flying above Tsar's head. "This, master, is a very bad idea indeed," said the raven. The talking raven was called Caliburn, and he would have been a handsome bird, but unfortunately it was his job to keep Tsar out of trouble, and the worry of this impossible mission meant his feathers kept falling out. "It isn't really fair to lead your animals and the sprites and young fellow wizards into all this danger." As the son of the great enchanter and a boy with a great deal of personal charisma, Tsar had a lot of followers. A pack of 5 wolves, 3 snowcats, a bear, 8 sprites, an enormous giant called Crusher, and a small crowd of other wizard youngsters, all following Tsar as if they were hypnotized, all shivering, all scared, and pretending not to be. "Oh, don't worry. You worry too much," said Caliburn. "Caliburn," said Tsar, pulling King Cat to a halt, jumping off his back. "Look at this lovely pretty glade here. You see, it's perfectly safe and exactly the same as the rest of the forest." Tsar looked around with a breezy satisfaction on his face, as if they'd stopped by a delightful woodland dell filled with frolicking bunnies and baby deer, rather than the cold, eerie little clearing where the yew trees leaned in threateningly and mistletoe dripped like warlocks' tears. The other wizards drew their swords, and the growling snowcat's fur stood up with fear to such an extent that they looked like furry puffballs. The wolves padded restlessly, trying to form a protective circle around their humans. Only the smaller sprites shared Tsar's enthusiasm, but that was because they were too young to know any better. I don't know if you have ever seen a sprite, so I'd better describe these ones to you. There were 5 larger sprites, all faintly resembling a human, crossed with a fierce, elegant insect. When irritated or bored, which was often, they blinked on and off like stars, and purple smoke drifted out of their ears. They were so see-through you could watch their hearts beating. Then there were 3 smaller, younger ones who, because they were not yet adult, were known as hairy fairies. Czar's favourite was an eager, slightly stupid little thing called Squeeze Juice. Oh, it's lovely, squeaked Squeeze Juice. It's this tremendous, glustiously loveliest clearing I've ever seen. What's this francintestine flower? Let me guess. It's a buttercup, it's a daisy, it's a geranium, it's a cauliflower. He flew into the upper branches of a particularly gloomy and sinister tree, and perched on the edge of one of its fleshy flowers, which had ominous spikes on the ends of its leaves, and was in fact called a sprite-eating hobtrap. The flower snapped shut with the briskness of a mousetrap, capturing poor little Squeeze Juice inside. Caliburn landed on Czar's shoulder and gave a heavy sigh. I don't like to say I told you so, said Caliburn, but we've only been in this perfectly safe little clearing in the Bad Woods for 1.5 minutes, and you've already lost one of your followers to a carnivorous flower. Nonsense, scolded Czar good-naturedly. I haven't lost him. That's the whole point about being a leader. Whenever my followers get into trouble, I rescue them because that's what a leader does. Czar climbed the tree, and 200 feet up, swaying precariously on a couple of creaking twig-like boughs, he took out his dagger and popped open the sprite-eating hobtrap to release a panting little Squeeze Juice in the nick of time. I's fine, squeaked Squeeze Juice. I's fine. I can't feel my left leg, but I's fine. Don't worry, Squeeze Juice. That's just the hobtrap's digestive juices. The feeling will return in a couple of hours. Czar called out as he dropped down from the tree. You see, I'm a great leader. Stick with me and you'll be fine. The wizard youngsters looked very thoughtful indeed, and at that moment Czar's older brother, Luther, came out of the shadows behind them, sitting astride a great grey wolf, and followed by even more sprites and animals and young wizard followers than Czar himself. Czar stiffened because he hated his older brother, Luther. Luther was bigger than Czar. He was nearly as tall as their father. He was brilliant at magic. He was good-looking and clever, and my goodness, didn't he know it? He was the smuggest smug wizard you could possibly imagine, and he often sneaked on Czar to get Czar into trouble. What are you doing here, Luther? Oh, I just followed you to see what unbelievably stupid and pointless thing my ickle baby brother was doing this time, drawled Luther. Great leaders like me don't do pointless expeditions. We're here for a reason. It's none of your business. Fumed Czar. Czar considered telling Luther some elaborate lie about what he was doing, but he couldn't resist showing off. We're going to catch ourselves a witch, boasted Czar. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. This was the first time that Czar had mentioned to his followers the purpose of their expedition, and it was very unwelcome news indeed. A witch? The bear, the snowcat, and the wolves went very still and began to shake. Even Ariel, the wildest and most unafraid of Czar's sprites, shot up into the air and momentarily disappeared. There are witches in this part of the Bad Woods now, I know it, whispered Czar excitedly, as if a witch were a delightful sort of present that he was offering everyone. There was a long silence, and then Luther and his wizard followers began to laugh. They laughed and laughed and laughed, and they laughed some more. Oh, come on, Czar, Luther said at last, once he'd got his breath back. Even you must know that witches have been extinct for centuries. Yeah, I do. But what if some of them survived, and they've been hiding all this time? Look, here's what I found this morning in this very clearing only yesterday. Out of his rucksack, he carefully took out an absolutely gigantic black feather. It was huge, like the feather of a crow, but much, much larger. A soft black fading at the end to a glowing dark, shiny green, the colour of a mallard, which is a duck, head. It's a witch's feather, whispered Czar. Luther smiled, his most superior smile. It's just a feather of some big old bird, scoffed Luther. Some giant crow. You get some weird things living in the Bad Woods, you know this. Czar frowned and hung the feather from his belt. Well, I've never seen a bird as big as this one must be, said Czar grumpily. It's all nonsense, smiled Luther. Only a brainless fool like you wouldn't know that. Witches were destroyed forever, remember? Caliban flapped downward and landed on Tsar's head. Forever is a long word, said the raven. You see, said Tsar triumphantly, Caliban is a bird of omen who can see into the future and into the past, and he doesn't think that witches are gone forever. All I know is if witches were not to be extinct for some reason, you wouldn't want to be going meeting one in a dark place. What do you want a witch for? I'm going to catch the witch, said Tsar, and remove its magic and use it for myself. There was another horrified silence. Eventually Luther spoke. That, little brother, is the worst plan I've ever heard you make in the whole history of plan making. You're just jealous you didn't think of it, brother, said Tsar. I have a few questions, said Luther. How are you going to catch the witch in the first place? That's what the net's for, said Tsar, taking a net out of his rucksack and holding it up. You couldn't fault his enthusiasm, at least. One of us will volunteer to be wounded ever so slightly, just a scratch, and the blood will attract the witch. Oh, great, said Luther. Now you're going to wound one of your sad little followers in a forest stuffed with raving werewolves and blood-sniffing ogre breaths. Come on, you're completely crazy. Off your rocker. This plan is as pathetic as you are. Tsar ignored him and continued. Then I'll entangle the witch in this net when it attacks. Next question. Okay, question 2. No living wizard has ever seen a witch. So how do you know what one looks like? Tsar opened his rucksack and took out the book the size of a large atlas, entitled The Spelling Book. Every wizard is equipped with a spelling book given to them at birth. Tsar's was looking extremely worse for wear. One part of it was invisible. It accidentally got dropped in an invisibility potion. Another bit was burned so black you could barely read it. This happened when Tsar set the wizard camp on fire, and many of the pages were loose and dropping out all over the place. Too many adventures to go into here. Tsar opened the book to the contents page, which had the 26 letters of the alphabet written on it in very large gold script, spelled out witches by tapping on each letter in turn, and whirr, the book turned its own pages, which seemed to go on forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. The chapters in front turning invisible as the book riffled through the rest of them like an endless pack of cards, until eventually they stopped at the right place. That's weird. It doesn't say what they look like. But they're green, I think, said Tsar. Someone else thought witches could turn invisible and they had acid blood. Another that they squirted that blood through their eyes. I'm sure we'll recognise one when we see it, said Tsar impatiently, shutting the spelling book. They're supposed to be pretty horrible, aren't they? Awesomely horrible, said Caliban gravely. The most terrifying creatures that ever walked the earth. So, even if you do catch this witch, how will you persuade it to take part with its magic? Asked Luther. I'm imagining that invisible green acid blood squirting witches that are the most terrifying creatures that ever walked this earth will not give up their magic if you ask them pretty please. Ha ha! Said Azar craftily. I've thought of that. With a grand flourish, he put on some gloves, reached into his rucksack and took out a small saucepan. And I'm going to leave it there. That's page 33. So tomorrow we'll start from page 34. Enjoy the rest of your day. I hope you're enjoying your time at home. We are missing you all. And we will see you soon. Goodbye.